once they become permanent residents of the U.S. is to become a U.S. citizen. Naturalization is the process by which those foreign nationals, someone who is neither a citizen nor a national of the U.S. at the time of birth, can apply for and obtain U.S. citizenship and become a naturalized American citizen. Many people hold a common perception that becoming a naturalized U.S. citizen is an extremely complicated and difficult process, but in reality, the process is quite simple. While the naturalization process is relatively easy, it doesn't mean that you take things lightly. And some foreign nationals do find that the process is long and at times confusing. The reason for the long delay is that there are so many people who want to become U.S. citizens that all applicants must wait their turn. Many people do not understand what the requirements are or why they are what they are. Let's begin our exploration of this topic by looking at who qualifies to naturalize and the basic requirements or qualifications for naturalization. Who qualifies to become a naturalized U.S. citizen? Before you can begin the process for becoming a naturalized U.S. citizen, you have to fall into one of the following categories. 1. You are a foreign national who has been a permanent resident of the U.S. for 5 years. 2. You are a foreign national who has been a permanent resident of the U.S. for 3 years and who is currently married to a U.S. citizen and has been married to the same U.S. citizen for the past 3 years. 3. You are a foreign national who has been a permanent resident and has served in the U.S. Armed Forces for at least 3 years. 4. You are a foreign national who served honorably in the U.S. Armed Forces during a specified period of armed conflict. The following periods have been designated under this provision. World War I, that period from November 1, 1916 to April 6, 1917. World War II, covering from September 1, 1939 to December 31, 1946. The Korean conflict, June 25, 1950 to July 1, 1955. The Vietnam conflict, February 28, 1961 to October 15, 1978. Operation Desert Shield, Desert Storm, August 29, 1990 to April 11, 1991, and Operation Enduring Freedom, September 11, 2001 until now, or any other period which the President, by executive order, has designated as a period in which the armed forces of the United States are engaged in military operations involving armed conflict with hostile foreign forces. Fifth category, we're married to a U.S. citizen who died during a period of honorable active duty service in the U.S. Armed Forces. Sixth, you serve on a vessel operated by the U.S. and have been a U.S. permanent resident for the past 5 years. 7, you're an employee or an individual who is stationed or employed abroad under contract to the U.S. government and have been a U.S. permanent resident for the past 5 years. 8, you are a person who performs ministerial or priestly functions abroad for a religious denomination or an interdenominational organization with a valid presence in the U.S., and you have been a U.S. permanent resident for the past 5 years. You're the spouse of a U.S. citizen who is stationed abroad or employed abroad and who is one of the following: a member of the U.S. Armed Forces, an employee or an individual under contract to the U.S. government, an employee of an American institution of research recognized by the Attorney General, an employee of a public international organization of which the United States is a member by law or treaty, an employee of an American-owned firm or corporation engaged in the development of foreign trade or commerce for the United States, or a person who performs ministerial or priestly functions of a religious denomination or in an interdenominational organization with a valid presence in the United States. Let's look at the basic requirements for naturalization. The basic requirements for naturalization include: you must live in the U.S. as a permanent resident for a specific amount of time. This is called continuous residence. You must be present in the U.S. for specific time periods, the physical presence requirement. You must spend a specific amount of time in the state or USCIS district prior to your filing. You must behave in a legal and acceptable manner, good moral character. You must know English and information about the U.S. history and government. This is the English and Civics test. You must understand and accept the principles of the U.S. Constitution, known as attachment to the Constitution. These are the basic requirements for becoming a naturalized U.S. citizen. But what do they mean? Let's take a closer look and find out. Continuous residence. The immigration laws have clearly defined continuous residence. It means that you must live in the U.S. as a permanent resident for a specified period of time. Most people must be permanent residents and continuous residents for 5 years. 3 years if you're married to a U.S. citizen, before they begin the naturalization process. The date on your permanent residence card is the date your specific period, usually the 5 years, begins. For refugees, this means 5 years from the date they arrived in the U.S., which is usually the date they obtained permanent resident status. For those granted asylum status in the U.S., this 5-year period begins 1 year before they begin their permanent resident status. If you leave the United States for a long period of time, usually 6 months or more, you may be deemed to have a break in your continuous residence. If you are outside the U.S. for 1 year or longer, you automatically have a break in your continuous residence, and the 5-year clock starts ticking all over again. That clock starts then on the date of your return. However, you will reach the 5-year mark in 4 years and 1 day because you can count 1 year period preceding your return as part of the 5 years. Physical presence in the United States. As with the continuous residence, the immigration laws have clearly defined physical presence. It means the time that you have actually been present in the United States. If you are a permanent resident, at least 18 years old, typically you must be physically present in the United States for at least 1/2 of the continuous residence period. For most residents, that means 30 months during the last 5 years before filing, or if filing based on marriage to a U.S. citizen, 18 months during the last 3 years before filing. The third requirement, time as a resident in the state or US CIS district of filing. Prior to filing your application for becoming a naturalized U.S. citizen, you must have lived in the state or US CIS district where you apply for at least 3 months. Students can apply for naturalization either where they go to school or where their family lives, if they still depend on their parents for support. Let's look at good moral character. The law requires that to be eligible for naturalization, you must be a person of good moral character for the period, which is typically the 5 years or 3-year period. However, the US CIS can look back even farther. An applicant cannot be a person of good moral character and is permanently barred from naturalizing if they have ever been convicted of murder or an aggravated felony on or after November 29, 1990. A person is not considered to be a person of good moral character if they commit certain acts or crimes during the statutory period, that 5-year period, before they apply for their naturalization, or if they lie during their naturalization interview. Behaviors that show a lack of good moral character include drunk driving or being a habitual drunk, illegal gambling, prostitution, lying to gain an immigration benefit, failing to pay court-ordered child support, committing terrorist acts, persecuting someone because of race, religion, national origin, political opinion, or social group membership. Most of these do not even require a conviction. Simply engaging in the activity is sufficient for a finding that you are not a person of good moral character. Let's look at the 5th requirement, knowledge of English and civics. To become a naturalized U.S. citizen, you must be able to read, write, and speak everyday English. You must also have a basic knowledge of U.S. history and the U.S. form of government. This is known as the civics portion of the interview. At your interview on the N-400, that's the application that you must file, you will be required to pass an English test and a test of civics. The USCIS officer will ask you to read up to 3 sentences in English and to write up to 3 sentences in English. These sentences will be dictated to you by that officer. The officer will also determine your ability to speak English during the course of the interview. The test of civics is to examine your knowledge of U.S. history, our Constitution, and our form of government. The U.S. government has decided that if an individual understands and knows how decisions are made and which elements of American history have contributed to making the country what it is today, he or she, that's you, the applicant, will be more able to make sound decisions in the public arena when voting and voicing your opinion, thus making you a better citizen. Exemptions to the English requirements and the civics requirements. Certain permanent residents who have lived in the U.S. for a long length of time, when you apply for naturalization, have different test requirements because of their age and the length of time they have lived in the U.S. If you are age 50 or older, and you have lived as a permanent resident in the U.S. for 20 years, you do not have to take the English test. You must still take the civics test, but you can take it in your own language. If you are age 55 or older and have lived as a permanent resident in the U.S. for 15 years, again, you do not have to take the English test, and you can take the civics test in your own language. If you are age 65 or older, lived as a permanent resident in the U.S. for 20 years, you do not have to take the English test, and you can take a simplified civics test in your own language. Attachment to the Constitution. What's that mean? Becoming a naturalized U.S. citizen, you must be willing to support and defend the United States and its Constitution. You declare your attachment or loyalty to the United States and the Constitution, and renounce any foreign allegiance and or foreign title you may have when you take the oath of allegiance. The final step in the naturalization process, and when you become a U.S. citizen, is when you actually take the oath of allegiance. The oath of allegiance is a promise to be loyal to the United States. It came about during the Civil War when captured Confederate soldiers and Confederate sympathizers were forced to take it to avoid being put in prison. The oath of allegiance, I'm going to run through it for you. I hereby declare on oath that I absolutely and entirely renounce and abjure all allegiance and fidelity to any foreign prince, potentate, state, or sovereignty of which I have heretofore been a subject or citizen. That I will support and defend the Constitution and laws of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that I will bear arms on behalf of the United States when required by law, that I will perform non-combatant services in the armed forces of the United States when required by law, that I will perform work of a national importance under civilian direction when required by law, and that I take this oath and obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, so help me God. In certain cases where the applicant can show that he or she is opposed to any type of service in the armed forces based on your religious teaching or belief, the USCIS will permit you to take a modified oath with the following phrase removed. That I will bear arms on behalf of the United States when required by law, that I will perform non-combatant service in the armed forces of the United States when required by law. Let's look at the naturalization ceremonies. If the USCIS approves your application for naturalization, you will be scheduled to attend an oath ceremony to take the oath of allegiance. The ceremony can be either an administrative ceremony, which is administered by a USCIS, or a more formal court ceremony administered by a U.S. District Court judge. The USCIS will send you the Form N-445, Notice of Naturalization Oath Ceremony. This will tell you the time and date of your ceremony. You must complete this form. It asks questions about your activities since your naturalization interview and examination, and then bring that to the ceremony. If you cannot go to your scheduled ceremony, you can reschedule the ceremony. To reschedule, you have to return the Form N-445 to the local USCIS office, along with a letter explaining why you cannot attend that ceremony. When you arrive and check in at your oath ceremony, you will turn in your permanent resident card. You will no longer need the permanent resident card because when you complete the ceremony, you will get a certificate of naturalization. An immigration official will read each part of the oath slowly and ask you to repeat the words. After you take the oath, you will receive your certificate of naturalization. This certificate proves that you are now a U.S. citizen. As noted above, you do not become a U.S. citizen until you have taken the oath of allegiance at a formal naturalization ceremony. The oath of allegiance ceremony is a public event. Finally, naturalization is one of the ways of obtaining U.S. citizenship. Naturalization is a privilege extended to foreign nationals who meet the minimum requirements. You must prove your worth through the process, and in the end, you'll be granted that certificate of naturalization. U.S. citizenship bestows several rights and responsibilities on new citizens. The naturalized United States citizen may now vote, serve on state and federal juries, petition to bring family members to the U.S., obtain U.S. citizenship for children born abroad, and will become eligible for many federal jobs and many more government benefits. Overall, the decision to pursue naturalization to become a U.S. citizen is one of the most important decisions that you will have to face. If you are thinking about becoming a naturalized U.S. citizen or have any doubts in this matter, consult a Visa Pro immigration attorney. We will be happy to guide you through this process.